Dude, this one is gonna raise some chatter, I am telling you, because we're finally gonna address and test one of the most controversial and talked about aspects of engine building, and it is rod ratio. Long time. And finally it's gonna happen. What is it? It's the controversy addressed. The controversy about rod ratio. What is rod ratio? Simply, it is the length of the connecting rod divided by the stroke of the crankshaft. It seems really simple, right? However, if you read about engines at all, you will find out that people think it is like the most critical part of engine performance. You'll find guys who are designing their whole camshaft and cylinder head package around the length of the connecting rod. Now, you might ask yourself, why could it possibly matter? So let's get into that. What I've got here are connecting rods that were supplied to us by K1. This one is 6.135 inches long. This one is 6.8 inches long. So the rod ratio of these two, with the crank in this engine, which is 3.76 inch stroke, for the short rod, the ratio is 1.63 to 1. For the long rod, the ratio is 1.8 to 1. Now, what happens inside the engine is that piston speed is the same throughout a full revolution, regardless of your rod length. For example, if you want to calculate your piston speed in feet per minute, all it is RPM multiplied by the crank stroke, and then you take that and divide it by 6, and you get your average piston speed in feet per minute. But the thing is, with different rod lengths, the piston is accelerating and decelerating in different places in the cylinder. The short rod is faster in mid-cylinder on its way up, and it is faster across top dead center. It spends less time with the piston dwelling at top dead center than the long rod. The long rod tends to slow down the piston speed at mid-cylinder stroke, and it also makes the piston dwell longer at top dead center. Now, inversely, the long rod makes it dwell more at top dead center, but less at bottom dead center. And the opposite is true with the short rod. It dwells less at top dead center and more at bottom dead center. And so people have all sorts of theories about how that piston position and speed in the cylinder can affect the performance of your engine based on the camshaft and the cylinder head and a bunch of other variables. And you know what? I could talk about it forever. But instead, what we're gonna do is put it to a real world test in this engine right here. Basically, we're starting with a big block Chevy platform, but we are using a Dart aftermarket block. And because I wanted to test two radically different lengths of rods, I mean, there's a difference of more than 5/8 of an inch here, I had to do the math to figure out the engine that would take the biggest difference. And this is what I figured out. From 6.135, which is, by the way, a stock rod length on a big block Chevy, all the way to 6.800, which is really big, required a very short stroke crankshaft. So this thing begins with a crank that has a stroke of 3.76 inches. It's like a stock 396 or 427 crank. I used the Dart Big M block in order to get a big bore of 4.5 inches. And the reason I did that is I wanted some displacement. And this thing still turns out pretty small. It is a 478 cubic inch engine. Now, with that in mind, I knew that I wanted a lot of RPM in order to show a difference in rod ratio. And I also knew that I wanted to make some high compression so that it would make some power. So we begin with some very custom pistons that were designed for me by JE Pistons. These are specific just for this test. What's trick about them is that they are able to go into the Dart cylinder head and collect the data points, basically make a digital map of it, and make a dome that was the largest that it could possibly be for this engine. And they also cut the valve reliefs just for this camshaft. So the final compression ratio is 12.25 to 1. The other thing that we need to look at here, and this is another aspect of connecting rod length, is if I put these side by side and line them up exactly at the top of the dome, not at the top of the dome, but the top of the flat surface of the piston, you can see that the compression height of these two pistons is very different, because in order to package between the stroke of the crankshaft and the deck height of the engine, you have got to offset the compression height of the piston to accommodate the length of the rod. So you can see here with the short rod, I've got a very tall piston compression height. With the long rod, that shortens up quite a bit. And frankly, with the pin up here in the oil rail of the oil ring, that can cause problems. But conversely, with the short rod, you've got to have a much heavier piston than with the long rod. And so the piston itself can affect the performance based on the rod length. And here's another thing that's an effect of long versus short rods, and I'm gonna exaggerate it here on the table. Let's imagine that these pistons and rods are both in an engine with the same amount of crankshaft rotation. With the long rod, the angularity from the piston to the rod might be about like that. With the short rod, it is much more extreme, something like that. And therefore, the short rod causes more side loading on the piston. This rod is actually shoving the piston more this way into the cylinder wall, which can lead to friction problems and mostly more bore wear. So that's how I've specially built the low end here, and I really have to thank everybody at Race Winning Brands for working with me through all of this. Now let's talk about the basic specs. The cylinder heads are a Dart Pro 1 CNC aluminum deal 365 inlet runner. And at the top end, I've got a Dart single plane intake manifold and a Holley 1050 Dominator carburetor. The big deal in all of this is going to be the camshaft. It is a honkin' big solid roller from Crane. The specs on the duration at 50 thousandths tappet lift are 284 on the intake, 296 on the exhaust. It's on a 112 lobe separation angle. That cam is important because it is going to allow this thing to run up to 7,500 RPM. Honestly, it could go more, but we limited it to that because we were concerned about the longevity of the valve train with a stock type rocker arm and with stainless steel valves in it. So this thing is going to make some big honking power, but the question is, what is the different rod length gonna do? And to do that, we actually built two completely different short blocks, assembled by our friend Andy Mitchell, which we really appreciate. So we're gonna switch the top end just from one short block to the other so that we can keep everything as consistent as possible. The first engine that we're gonna put on the pump is the long rod engine, the 6/800-inch rod.
Man, that's a long time to wait, Freiberger.
Well, the
patience is a virtue.
Rod ratio thing is like one of the most talked about subjects that people have about engines, and we're finally going to find out. Because I've never seen any of the aftermarket do this test. I've heard the stories about Ray or Morrison. I mean, you've never done it, right?
I have never done this personally. I've always leaned on that David Rear thing that I remember reading in the back of National Dragster, you know, because they had done all that stuff in the Pro Stock and NASCAR stuff, and kind of, you know, took that as a lead, but as far as testing it here, we've never done it.
I thought you guys did a magazine test years and years ago, and the guy was claiming just enormous benefits for the long rod.
That's the small block that Chevrolet should have built.
Exactly. You know what? A lot of people remember that story in Hot Rod Magazine. Yeah, the 350 Chevy should have built. Pete Saueracker, I think, wrote that.
That's it.
Yeah.
And did you do that test?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But do I remember the test? No.
Well, the thing is, I don't think there was any A/B. He was just categorically claiming that the long rod was the most
The other
awesome
problem
thing.
was he was trying to run 12-to-1 compression.
Yeah.
Thinking that the long rod was somehow going to make it through that. And he was grabbing a lot of that info from some stuff that Smokey Unic had written earlier on.
Well, Smokey Unic always said, put the longest rod in that you can possibly find.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I don't know what to expect. I really don't.
That's why we're doing it.
I know, and that's what we do.
I think it might turn out to be remarkably similar between the two engines.
We don't know yet.
Yeah.
I'm not coming into this with any preconceived notion. I just want to test it. So Steve has got this thing completely tuned up. He's handled the carburetor calibration. He's done a timing sweep on the thing and found out that it's insensitive between 34 and 38 degrees total.
It's the same. Yeah.
So we've got it at 38 degrees, and when we do the other engine, we'll do that same timing sweep. And as a matter of fact, I think we'll look at the fuel curve also. So with the knowledge that this is ready to go, fire it up and let's do it. All right, here we go with the long rod engine. 6.800 is the length on these connecting rods.
Wow, not bad. Big block Chevy.
It's pretty stout. Yeah. stumbled into a pretty good combo for no reason, even though nobody in their right mind would build a 478 cubic inch motor. But aside from that,
478 is the motor of the month.
right?
Hey, those 396
Or you're
cranks.
hoping they are.
But for what it is, it's fairly stout.
No, it actually is really good. With a
Yeah.
couple of changes, it could be really good.
So there's that baseline pull all tuned up. We've got 804.2 at 7,300 RPM and 622.9 pound-feet of torque at 5,700. Not bad for what it is.
That's a nice motor.
You know what? We need to pick up more data. So there's a couple of other things Steve and I were talking about that we would like to do so we can fully explore this. We want to do
Low
first,
RPM.
low RPM. So what we're going to do now is run this thing up to 3,000 RPM and just park it there and take a bunch of data points. And the reason we're doing that is to try and discover if there is a difference between the long rod and the short rod as far as low end torque. Our third and final test is going to be steady state at peak torque. And what we're looking for there is what's called a torque offset. We're going to see the difference between the torque number that it makes during a power sweep versus the torque that it makes at steady state. And we're going to compare that same thing once we get to the short rod engine and see if there's any difference there. What we did there is at 3,000 RPM, it collected a whole bunch of data points, and we're gonna average them all, and the answer is 399.3 pound-feet of torque. Surprisingly low for what this thing is, but that's because it's way out of its range. So our conclusion there is at 5,700 RPM steady state, our average torque is 633.7 pound-feet. Now, if we look at a curve versus what it made at steady state, we're gonna see a little bit of a difference. See, 633 is more torque than it made anywhere. So on this graph, what you're seeing is that the red line is the sweep at 300 RPM per second, and this data point is static. And it is, you know, it's 11 numbers up from when we swept it. We have our 3 different data points that we were concerned about. I think we're ready to go swap it over to the short rod
Do all
engine.
the fun stuff.
Yeah. And the changeover begins. We're about to swap from the long rod engine to the short rod engine. Now we're going to use the exact same cylinder heads, intake manifold, distributor, and carburetor, and also the crank trigger on the thing. We're just going to change the short block, which is as identical as we could possibly make it with the exception of the rod length. You can see that we've got a crank trigger ignition on this thing. That's just so we can be much more precise about the ignition timing. This thing made the same power between 34 and 38 degrees total on timing, and I'm super curious to find out if that's any different with the short rod engine. Prepare to be somebody. We're really close. We took the whole top end off of the other engine, and now we're dealing with our short rod, short block. And we got the cylinder heads on here. He's torquing it up. We got to put on valve train, intake manifold, ignition, and boom.
This torque wrench is digital, so it's high tech. It gives me a beep and a digital display of exactly what the torque is. That is completely failure proof.
We've got our short rod engine on the dyno, and we've been playing with it here just a little bit, messing around with ignition timing. So we know that the optimal timing on the long rod engine was 38 degrees, and essentially it didn't care between 34 and 38 degrees where you actually left it. What we found out with this thing is that it's a little bit more sensitive to timing. It didn't really like 36, it was okay at 38, and between 40 and 42, it really made the same power. So we're looking at a 2-degree difference between long rods and short rods in the timing that it prefers. One of the things I want to get out of you, though, is we're going to do 2 completely different short blocks here. I mean, they're identical parts-wise. They were assembled by the same guy. They're the same. But do you think they're going to run the same? If they were identical, the same connecting rod, everything, well, those 2 engines perform identically on the dyno.
In theory, they're supposed to, but within a percentage. What I can tell you is that I've done a number of sets of twins in big boats, and it is not uncommon for me to see 10, 12 horsepower difference, even in twins that were built identically.
That's the answer I was hoping to get from you. And the reason is if we see 5 to 15 difference, we have to call that about the same because it can be the difference in ring seal, valve job. I mean, we've attempted to sort all that out identical, but there can be a difference. I'm hoping that we also see a difference in the shape of the curve based on what I've read about people's beliefs on long rod versus short rod, not just peak power, but where it's making power. Yeah, so we're gonna run it right now and show you what it makes with the short rods.
Pretty good.
It was pretty good.
Yeah.
So the first thing I'm gonna do is tell you what our peak numbers are before we look at a graph overlaying the two. So peak, basically the same torque. We saw 621.2 at 5,800, 100 RPM higher than we saw with the long rod. And basically it's the same torque number. It's 622.9 with the long rod versus 621.2 with the short rod. That's a wash. But then you look at the horsepower, and we used to make 804 at 7,300 with the long rod, and the short rod made 815 at 7,400, which is, again, 100 RPM higher than what we saw with the short rod. So that is like the opposite of what you generally hear about long versus short rod.
Yeah, well,
Not according to you?
well, I've heard conflicting theories
Well,
on
that's
that.
the thing about the whole deal. Is
Yeah.
I say generally, I think I hear that the long rod is better for high RPM, but you're right. There are different theories from different people about what's going to happen. Let's look at the curves and see what overall it did. Wow. Okay, so here are our power curves with the red lines representing the long rod and the black lines representing the short rod. And the short rod ends up throwing away some low-end torque and making some high-end power.
Well, you'd expect a long rod to make a little more torque at the very bottom.
You would?
I would.
Because that's the opposite of other theories
Isn't
that
that
I've
what
seen.
it-
I've seen
What
both.
everybody else will tell
Yeah.
you, or what you read typically now, is that the shorter rod is going to help the port be more active and help bottom end and
All that.
gobbledygook. But you know, you're the guy with the long rod theory.
By the same token, you know, if you're going to gain that at the bottom, you're going to give up somewhere else because everything's a trade-off, and you'd expect to see that little edge at the top.
Well, let's go ahead and run the other tests that we ran with the other engine. Let's do steady state 3,000 RPM. I think we suspect the answer now, but let's do it for the sake of comparative analysis.
So identical
Same.
almost.
Same. Interesting. So the steady state torque at 3,000 RPM with both these connecting rods is identical. 399.2 versus 399.3. I'm calling that the same.
You think?
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we're going to do a steady state torque test at 5,800 RPM, which is where this connecting rod made its peak torque number of 621.2, but that's not the number we're about to see when we run at steady state. So this is going to be steady state 5,800. Okay, the average torque throughout gathering that data was 634.9, and it was 633.7 with the other deal. So basically steady state, we're calling no difference. But now we're gonna look at the difference between steady state and sweeping the engine, which will tell us the difference in inertia of how heavy the parts are. All right, so with the long rod, the difference between steady state and sweeping it was 10.8 pound-feet. So now we have to look at the same thing with short rod, 621.2 versus 634.9. So the difference between sweeping and steady state is greater with the short rod than it is with the long rod, which would add up to the fact that
Slightly.
it's got a heavier weight to it.
Slightly, yeah. It's showing a trend.
I guess our final conclusion is that, boy, the long rod made more power below 5,500 RPM, and the short rod made more power above 6,500, but the difference up at the top end is negligible, and the difference at the bottom end could be in inertia, but my takeaway is that I still wouldn't build my engine around the rod length. Here's another thing that David Rayer and Dick Maskin were saying, is that a huge part of the difference is how the piston construction affects the piston ring stability. And I don't know if in this piston, the difference in compression height is really going to make a difference in that or not. But they're saying if you get the pin up into the oil rail, that you could see some more piston ring instability, which can lead to stuff like this.
When you've got a skirt this long, it's going to have more tendency to rock than a skirt this long.
Right.
So, you know, when it's unloading and loading, and maybe that's what we're seeing is ring stuff in the short piston and the long rod at the top, because that's where you're going to see more issues with rings, is at higher speeds.
So that's really a huge takeaway here, is that what we're seeing in the difference might not necessarily be the connecting rod itself, but the effect of weight and piston ring stability. So it could be other things.
The effect of the package.
Yeah. More questions than answers, as usual, on Engine Masters. Let's go. Okay, Steve, this is a biggie.
Okay, let's hear it.
I have done a lot of thinking about this and a lot of reading and listened to a lot of other experts, and basically I've got my own conclusion, justification for that conclusion, and then a bunch of caveats.
Well, I'm going to tell you whether you're wrong or right.
That's what I want. We need to debate. Okay, so here's my ultimate conclusion. And I'm gonna narrow it a little bit and say, for typical engines within the world of the stuff we can accomplish, meaning not F1 stuff, not even NASCAR stuff, but you know, engines under 8,000 RPM, whether they're race or street, here it comes, rod ratio does not matter.
You know, I'll tend to agree with that.
Okay.
Within the normal range. I mean, if you go super, super long or incredibly short and do something crazy, well, then it might matter some.
Right. One guy I trust a lot, David Rayer from Rayer Morrison Racing Engines. This guy is like top end, very respected engine builder. And his opinion after a huge test that they did on a NASCAR engine with like a really short rod and a really long one, and what he said was hundreds of camshafts, was exactly the same thing, 0. So I did let that influence this a little bit, but what really impressed me is when we did the static test at 3,000 RPM and 5,700 RPM, we found out
at that point, we had identical results.
Identical results. And so that kind of takes everything but the rod length itself out of the picture. There's no inertia problem and there is no ring flutter problem.
Yeah, we're eliminating variables and we're just basically getting down to distilling the facts.
And so the other part of my conclusion was that the slight differences that we saw at the bottom end and the really slight difference we saw at the very top end are attributable to other factors, like inertia at the bottom end and maybe some ring seating issues at the top end with the long rod. In my opinion, what you want to do is pick your stroke first, which is going to be based on displacement and piston speed and things like that. And the next thing you want to do is call like JE Pistons and design the best piston for your ring package. And once you've got that down, you connect the two with a connecting rod and you have a nice day and don't worry about it. So now I have to go into the caveats, which are the rod ratios that we tested in this thing were 1.8 with a long rod and 1.63 with a short rod. That is not in the range of what anybody who loves rod ratio talk considers bad.
No, that's all pretty normal. In fact, most production engines fall within that range.
Right, so we didn't really test screwing it up, but I think we still were able to, you know, look at a range and look at a difference.
Yeah, and the takeaway for me is, basically, every time people think they're going to be super geniuses and do something completely out of the norm and prove everybody wrong, they usually prove themselves wrong.
Usually. So other caveats, I would say, once again, we're not dealing with F1 here. We're dealing with average stuff. And, you know, this is just one test. There's going to be other people who are going to say, we used the wrong cam, we used the wrong cylinder head, we had the wrong compression ratio, we should have used a different length rod. It goes on and on and on and on. And you know what? That is for you to discuss and argue based on the data that you can see here every single time on Engine Masters. 150 CFM. We've got the $264 rebuilt Summit carburetor. We've got the $301 remanufactured Edelbrock Performer, and we've got the $355 Street Demon. Now, the other thing that's in common with all of these carburetors is that they are not a Holley 4150 series. As you know, Engine Masters is kind of known for maybe liking carburetors just a little bit too much, and this is always our carb of choice, unless we're going with a Dominator. This is the Holley 4150 series with the removable float bowls. It's called a modular carburetor. It's so much the industry standard that it's been knocked off a bunch of times. We love them, but we're not going to use it this time. I specifically wanted to pick carburetors that we were not as familiar with and find out which is the best one. Now, the Edelbrock that we've gone with here is their Performer series based on the Carter AFB, and these things are hugely popular. They've been around for 2 decades plus. They make them in a bunch of different CFM ratings, 500, 600, 750, and even 800. This is the 750 CFM model. It is cheaper at $301 because it is a remanufactured version. The next one is the cheapest carburetor, period, that you can buy at Summit Racing with a 750 CFM ranking. It is the Summit brand carburetor. They call it an M2008. Now, this design was actually created by Holley like a dozen or 15 years ago, and now they are exclusive to Summit. It looks very much like one of those older Autolite carburetors that has a one-piece removable top. The thing that's kind of cool about them is that they take Holley tune-up parts like jets and power valves and things like that. You can get these in a couple different CFM ratings, and you can get vacuum secondary or mechanical secondary. So our last carburetor is also the most expensive. It's right behind me. It is the Street Demon for $355. It looks a lot like an old Carter thermal quad, but it really isn't. It has a lot of upgrades. It's smoother, it's better looking, and what really separates it from the other two is it's not a 4-barrel, actually. It is a 3-barrel. It's got a big oval-shaped throttle valve in the back of it, and it does have a big notch in it that makes it 4-barrel-ish, but that notch makes it so it'll fit on a regular intake manifold, and as a matter of fact, it will fit on any intake designed for a Holley 4150 carburetor. It doesn't take a spread bore intake at all. The engine that we're going to be testing all these on is our good old PET 383. You've seen this thing a zillion times on Engine Masters. The most important thing to know is that it makes about 470 pound-feet, about 460 horsepower, and everything that we're doing with these carburetors is going to apply to whatever engine you have that is roughly in that same power range, regardless of displacement or RPM. So this does apply to your life. What we're going to be looking at in the dyno is going to be power and calibration. We're going to run them straight out of the box. Then we're going to try and tune them up a little bit. So we're going to be able to rank all of them based on power alone, but we're also going to judge them based on price, appearance, and tunability. I do have one caveat to this entire thing, which is we're going to be testing these things only for wide open throttle performance. That's all we're going to know about how they drive. That's all we're going to know about how they are tuned up. Your results will vary driving these things around in part throttle, transient throttle positions, and things like that. So remember that as we go into the dyno and make this happen. We haven't even begun, and we've already got one demerit for the Summit carburetor. We fired it up with it running, and it had a hideous vacuum leak. It turns out this housing right here is hitting the intake manifold, and so we're gonna have to stack it with a couple of gaskets. No big deal. However, this is probably the most common intake manifold you would ever run with this carburetor. So this is good for you to know. We solved our problem with the Summit carburetor hitting the intake manifold. We're ready to run the thing, but look, I have new and extra information. We have a GoPro out there hanging right above the carburetor, and I have a live feed here so that I can watch it while Steve is running the thing. And remember, we're gonna run these things straight out of the box first and then tune them up if they need it, but usually they're flawless directly out of the box.
He's going to tune it up if they need
I know,
it.
Steve won't touch it.
I would look forward to it. It's gonna be my big break. I could get a new career as a carburetor tuner.
I think it's 100% open
Yeah, but
based on the live view.
it doesn't really sound very
Doesn't
good.
sound good.
It was almost pulsing like a massage shower head in a hotel room.
I didn't notice
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
That's almost creepy hearing you say that you're so intimate.
Well,
with,
you know what? I
with
was
the massage
I was a
shower.
little self-conscious even mentioning it, but
Yeah.
Well, I'm embarrassed that I know this, but actually Steve likes volume instead of pressure, so he just takes the head completely off
yeah,
the shower.
I just run the open pipe usually.
Right.
That's the way I've got it set up at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's like a waterfall of
Stop.
just the open pipe is the way to go.
I think the worst part is that I know that you do that.
Well, yeah, you can see me.
That's even creepier.
All right, let's do our show. We saw earlier that's a little lean on Cruise. What do you think about the secondaries opening?
I think we should time just to verify and have some sort of target. I don't think they're opening all the way.
Okay.
And I'm basing that solely on fuel flow. I'm looking at fuel flow in the primary, and I don't know enough about the carburetor, but primary fuel flow is like 130 pounds. Secondary's 78 pounds.
Way out of whack.
Yeah, so it's
Yep.
flowing more through the front. Now, maybe all the engine needs, and it might not make any more power, but it's just biased to the primary now.
Yeah, what Steve's talking about is that on a vacuum secondary carburetor, sometimes we see that the secondary throttle blades do not open all the way on the dyno, and they wouldn't in the car either. And so what we do is go out there and put a zip tie on the linkage to mechanically force them to open all the way, and we'll either see a difference or we won't.
Yeah, just have, like I say, have a target. So
Just to
let me
know.
go take care of that.
I'll do that right now. How about that, guys?
Use
Oh
the
yeah, I
zip
forgot.
tie.
He's the carburetor guy today.
Right. Right, here we go now with the secondary butterfly zip tied so that they'll open mechanically. They're open more. Now they're open. Performs
Wow.
as it should.
That was killer.
I could see in the video that earlier I could see the screws on the throttle blades, and this time they were rolled all the way over.
Yeah.
It sounded
Yeah.
way cleaner too.
Well, as soon as I rolled in and it made just looking at the incoming number at 3,000, it was at 415 pound-feet instead of 399
There
or
you
something.
go.
So I knew it was better.
Can we see if the fuel curve is still happy?
Now look how well balanced it is, primary to secondary.
oh
Yep. The
Perfectly
fuel flow
balanced.
primary and secondary is now the same.
That is some really valuable information if you have it to look at that fuel flow.
Let's look at the power versus the first pull without the zip tie. There you go. That is the difference between the power of a zip tie and no zip tie. So the actual answer to that, if you've got this carburetor in your car, is to mess around with the secondary spring, which actually controls rate and point of opening, but it'll also tend to open it more.
And I find that on just about any aftermarket carburetor that's vacuum secondary with a pod like that, they're always oversprung and
Yeah.
they just don't open. You know, that's an area that you always have to look at. Look at the power you gain.
I know, it's
Yeah.
massive. So that's a huge tip for you, just that right there. So our peak power right now is 472 horsepower, and the torque is actually 486.4, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is the best we've ever seen out of this engine. So
Yeah.
that's a mind blower. So wow, mark me impressed.
Me too.
So now we're gonna go to the next most expensive carburetor, which is, I think, the remanufactured Edelbrock. Okay, boom, Edelbrock next.
All right. How come I like all the weirdo carburetors?
Because they're defiant in the face of the mainstream. Now we're gonna put on the Edelbrock.
The tried and true Edelbrock. Now the Edelbrock is basically the configuration very similar to an AFB, which
Right.
is a production carburetor dating back from when? Like the 1950s?
And one of the claims to fame of both this and the Summit carburetor that we tested earlier is that they say they don't leak because they have a lid on top and the gasket is above the fuel level, so it can't leak. I have a feeling you're gonna get to jet this to your heart's content, or at least
boy.
metering rod it to your heart's content. Okay, so this is gonna be the Edelbrock 750. Ready?
Here we go.
Was that air door open all the way? Was that as far as it goes?
I didn't even look at it.
I could still see the whole butterfly of it.
Oh, maybe that's why it was warbling instead of revving up cleanly.
Let's have a look at the data.
Didn't it sound a little distressed to you?
Not particularly.
No?
Yeah, it made 461.3 horsepower at 5,700, and the torque came in at 472.4 at 4,200 RPM. So it's down significantly from our first carburetor, but I think we've got some looking around to do.
Let's take a look at the air-fuel ratio numbers.
For sure.
Yeah, it's certainly rich, wide open, kind of all the way through.
Oftentimes the dyno data can tell a tale.
Our air-fuel ratio is as rich as 11.8 and as lean as 12.4, but up at the top 12.1, almost a full ratio fatter than the prior carburetor.
It's a little rich, so the easiest tuning point on this is going to be the metering rod, because it's right up top and we can get to it.
Okay, I'll get you the kit.
All right.
Here comes the part of the show where Dulcich perfects the Edelbrock carburetor.
What I really like about these is the swing out access cover for the metering rods. Like some older designs, AFB, you actually had to take the screw all the way out and remove the cover. These, you could just swing them out of the way, pull this out. Beware of the fact there's a spring in there.
So here's how these work. This is a metering rod, and there is a jet at the bottom of the bottom half of the carburetor, and the metering rod basically plugs the hole of the jet, and it's got steps in it so that it plugs less and less of the jet as it makes more power. So it's like a combination of a power valve and a jetting device at the same time. So here I've got the special tuning kit. Edelbrock sells a different part number tuning kit for most of the different carburetors that they sell. So you go in here and you look at the chart. So this is a 7042. We want a fatter first number, right?
The 42 has to go to something like 54, I think.
Which we don't have.
Really?
You're gonna have to go to the jet.
No!
He knows it's gonna take forever to take the lid off.
All right, one more screw to tighten up, and we've completed a jet change. We just went to the secondary, and we took a stab at it, going from what, a 407?
From a
Steve?
407, which is 107 thousandths,
To a
to a
398.
398.
Yeah. So we haven't done the math. It's just a ballpark, but I think it's going to get us pretty close. We're going to be back in the cell, firing this up, and hopefully it'll be just about right.
So the secondary jet in these things doesn't have the metering rod, right? It is
Correct.
just a jet.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, let's see.
Okay.
Okay, 12.4 to 12.6 to 1.
Good, yeah.
Much more where you wanted to be. But what did it do to the power? By the way, sometimes on these charts, if you're looking at them, you'll see this is fuel flow down here. And look at the difference here between black, which is...
That's the last run.
Yeah.
After
Okay,
jetting.
so black is a little bit leaner and red is the richer number. So it actually did improve.
Yeah, I want to go back and look and see what that air fuel was on the richer run. Yeah,
It was in the 11s, now we're...
dropped down to the 11s on that one. So,
Yeah, it leaned out by one full ratio.
yeah, and picked up power like
Yeah.
it's supposed to. I mean, it picked up 10 horsepower.
So the best that we think we can do with the Edelbrock carburetor is 472.5 pound-feet of torque, and we made 460 horsepower. But the real question is when you overlay that with the earlier Summit carburetor. No.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
It's still
black line Edelbrock, red line Summit, and my personal opinion, that comes down to airflow. I think they call this Edelbrock a 750, but I think it's got so many things restricting airflow in the airstream and not very good secondary. You know, there's no radius into the barrels at all. There's a shear edge.
Right.
So final
Okay.
conclusion on that is that it was nowhere near as good as the Summit, but if it was on a 305 that was making 300 horsepower, it'd be way less of a difference between the two.
What kind of validates that, in my mind, is the way that the curve diverges. As airflow requirements increase, you know, the difference gets to be greater.
Okay, perfect. So now we move on to the Street Demon Thermoquad looking thing. So you should get even happier.
Simple looking.
You really like the style of this car.
I
I
can't
do.
believe you like the style so much. It's not
Well,
something that I thought would
it,
appeal to you.
It reminds me a bit of the Millennium Falcon with the.
You guys ready to run the carburetor that looks like the box it came out of?
You're such a hater. You really
It's
are.
just a big square. I
It's
don't
a
know.
big. It's like mid-century modern. It's beautiful. It's simplistic.
Okay, so this is the Street Demon carburetor that looks a lot like a thermoquad, but really isn't. So we're gonna see how it runs on the 383.
So there.
Well, it's a little chubby, but it made power. And that air door you can see in the video, it just thunk, falls right open.
Well, that's my point. Is it's not perfect and it's already good.
Yeah, you're right. I wonder if you had this in a car, would it do the would it sound like a thermoquad?
I don't know, but you sound a lot like a thermoquad.
Okay, well, it's running a little bit rich, but nonetheless, it made 481 pound-feet of torque and 470 horsepower.
Wow.
So it is right in the neighborhood. You know what? We could lean this out and
I don't think it was
12.2.
rich at the top or past peak torque. It was only at the very bottom that it was too rich.
Yeah, it was into the 11s, but then it like I said, it's kind of got an arc to it. It goes up to 12.8, 12.9, and then we're
then
at
it comes
12.2.
down. So
if,
it'll be too lean in here when we lean
if
it
we
out.
jet it, then yeah, it's going to start to get to be a little not so good in there where
Yeah.
peak torque is. Here's with the Edelbrock.
Oh, there's the Street Demon compared with the Edelbrock. The Edelbrock being the red lines. What's interesting is the Edelbrock was a little bit better below about
And
3,700.
that's where we're a little fat with
And that's what the Edelbrock
Demon.
tuned and jetted.
In conclusion, are we going to try and jet it, or are we too concerned that we're going to make it way too lean at peak torque?
When Troy brought the carburetor down, I believe he brought a calibration kit with it.
Really?
Oh,
I
boy.
swear.
Let's
I'm
go
out here,
investigate
guys.
that. We're going to go tune the Street Demon. He's already out of the room. He can't wait. We're heading out to tune this thing, and I realized something that I find ludicrous, which is you cannot jet it without taking it off the manifold, flipping it upside down, and getting at the screws that hold it together under here. Of course, the plus side to that is it's all nice and smooth and pretty up top and has no fasteners. But Dulcich is going to attempt to fix the tune-up without having to do any of that monkey motion by going straight to those metering rods, which are very similar to what we described to you on the Edelbrock carburetor.
Okay. Don't expect that to do much.
Now we're going to run the Street Demon with just a little bit of a fatter, meaning larger diameter metering rod in there in an attempt to lean it out a little bit. You know, Dulcich flippantly advised me to not expect much.
Look, I actually think it's going to be damn good. So just get that thing up to temp, pull the handle, and become amazed.
It was already good.
I know.
Yeah, it was.
It was good.
Maybe it'll make it better.
Basically within 1 and 1 of our best pull.
Yeah, I was watching the carburetor the whole time to see if anything strange happened, like standoff or who knows what. I didn't see it. Here's our final power numbers with the Street Demon. We made 479.8 pound-feet of torque. I'm happy calling that 480. And up at the top, 470.6 horsepower. But the real story here is going to be overlaying these three carburetors and declaring a winner in overall horsepower.
Yeah, but there are a few points where that Demon is actually better by a little bit.
yeah, right,
They're
leading up
swapping
to it,
places.
right?
Yeah, there's a weird wobble here, but the black
just
line
it.
is Demon, the blue line's Edelbrock, the red line here is the Summit
I would
carburetor.
say a toss-up as far as those two on top-end performance.
But the Summit carb was a clear
Little
winner.
fatter as far as torque. It
Torque,
went
yeah.
Yeah, from the jump
6
all the way
pound-feet
through
more.
through torque. It was the Summit carburetor. Man, that's almost too close to call. I think we have to go back to the three-way ranking system in multiple categories. Okay, let's go with appearance.
Okay.
Rank them from 3 is the worst to 1 is the best. Brulee.
Not the one I thought I would like the best, but it's the Demon's a 1. but the Summit, I guess, is a 2.
Okay, and Edelbrock 3. There you go. Dulcich.
I would give the Edelbrock a 1,
Okay.
and I would give the Summit a 2,
Yep.
and I give the Demon a 3.
Okay, I am actually going to go Summit 1, Edelbrock 2, Demon 3s. So the appearance category done, let's move on to cost. And I can tell you what that is. It's not a judged category. So it is going to be the Summit carburetor is the best, followed by the Edelbrock, followed by the Demon. Ease of tuning.
I guess since you have to remove the Demon, I'll say the Demon's the worst. The Edelbrock's in between, and the Summit's, I guess, the easiest of what's there.
Okay, Dulcich.
Number 1, Summit doesn't need any tuning at all.
Okay.
Number 2, Edelbrock, because we tune it successfully. Number 3, Demon, you have to take the whole freaking thing off the engine.
Okay, and I think I'm gonna go exactly the same way. And then finally, we're gonna average the power numbers for all these carburetors, and we're gonna end up in the end with 4 different categories: appearance, tuning, cost, and power.
The Demon, 379.
Okay,
Edelbrock is 368. Summit is 380.5.
okay, so Summit wins, Demon comes in second, Edelbrock comes in third. So let's crunch the numbers and see what we've got overall. The overall winner is Summit first, and then Edelbrock second, Demon third.
I guess the numbers don't lie.
Well, there's no question about the winner, because almost in every category we looked at, Summit carburetor was just outstanding piece.
And if we added a category for out of the box it works, Summit wins that too.
Yeah, I mean, when Steve was saying, well, we didn't have to tune it, I don't think that counts. It's how, if you have to tune it, how much work is it? So it's the winner if anybody really believes our ability to judge anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is questionable in itself.
Well, we just put opinion on top of facts, which is kind of what we do. Ready to go do that a little bit more outside?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Thanks, Brule.
Thanks, man.
I gotta be honest, I thought that the Summit carburetors were like the dorky kid that gets picked last for like dodgeball.
I know, but I liked it right away.
It killed, man.
I know.
I can't even believe it. But I have to say, all of these carburetors that we tested, I think for anything that's making less power than this, you know, they're a win. I think you pick them on appearance and features and tunability rather than on power, really.
Yeah, and actually none of them were real chumps on horsepower either. They were all pretty decent and very functional.
But conversely, I gotta be honest, if I'm trying to build myself like something that makes 600-700 horsepower, I'm not choosing any of these.
No, these are geared more towards the casual hobbyist who just want to bolt a carburetor on, do a minimal, if any, amount of tuning, and then just drive their car.
But by that measure, at least at wide open throttle, we don't know about drivability. Summit wins.
That's a very good carburetor from what we've seen.
Still, I'm pretty proud of the shootout. It was really interesting and you loved it.
I know, I was like overjoyed.
And I hope you are too, because that is our goal with every episode of Engine Masters. This time on Engine Masters, we're gonna show you how to save your engine and make more power with a simple swap of an oil pan. What we're gonna do here is test 2 completely different oil pans. One of them cheaper, the other ridiculously expensive. But the thing is, you're gonna learn some basics about oil pan design that apply to any engine. And now in truth, they're gonna make a bigger difference the more RPM that your engine turns. And that's why we selected this thing for our dyno mule. This has become like one of our favorite engines on the show. Let me tell you all about it. So it is a Dart Big M block, aftermarket block for big bores, 400-500 bores, but it's got a little tiny stroke in it, 3.76. And that's one thing about this is that everything we're gonna show you in this episode about oil control gets worse with longer strokes. So this is kind of a best case scenario with that little stroke that would come out of like a 396 Chevy or a 427. Obviously, they're all big block Chevy based. So that's our bottom end, which also includes some 12.25-to-1 compression custom JE pistons. Up top, we've got Dart Pro 1 CNC aluminum heads. The intake runner is 365 cc's. They're pretty radical. And we also have a Dart single plane intake manifold, and up top, the Holley Dominator that we love so much in 1050 CFM. The camshaft is the key to this thing wanting to RPM. It's a Crane solid roller. The duration at 50,000 tappet lift is 284, 296. It's on a 112 lobe separation angle. And you know what? This thing really wants to run 8,000 RPM, but Steve Brule won't let me do that because it's got steel valves in it and a standard rocker train, and honestly, he just doesn't want to see the thing fly apart. So all the testing we're gonna do here is limited to 7,500 RPM, but let me tell you, that is enough to make a huge difference in oil pans. Now let's have a look at what we're gonna start with. Here's the oil pan we're gonna test first. This is a Milodon setup, and this is $430 at Summit Racing. It is a full competition oil pan. It is for like a tube chassis drag car or a dragster or a boat because it is flat on the bottom and has no sump whatsoever. Now, we've seen in the dyno in the past that this is actually better than one that's designed for a passenger car because the passenger car units probably have a kick up right here, putting the bottom of the pan even closer to the crankshaft, which can lead to windage problems and things like that. Speaking of windage, this thing has got a louvered tray in it to control the oil and collect it as it's spinning off the crankshaft. It's also got some trap doors in it to control the oil for acceleration and deceleration, and this is clearanced for up to a 4.500 stroke on a big block Chevy. Now, we've run this thing before, and Brule has tested it on our specific engine, and he's found that 5.5 quarts is the right number on the dyno for this thing to have optimum performance and not lose oil pressure. Now, that number could change when you actually get it in a car. You'll hear us discussing oil levels once we get to testing the thing, but 5.5 is our number in a static condition on the dyno. Now we're gonna install this thing. Okay, we're back with our big block Chevy that we used for that connecting rod test.
One of my favorite engines now.
The big block Chevy. This particular one is one of your favorites?
Well, actually, kind of both of them are. What I love about both of them is they're 7,400 RPM single 4-barrel big blocks.
Yep.
How can you not like that?
Oh, it's great. And it's perfect for what we're about to do, the oil test. Because, well, actually, I suppose it could be better if it was a longer stroke. But it's still a lot of RPM.
We've seen lots of oil issues with wet sumps throughout all of these things in the past, and there's just never enough you can do with an oil system short of a dry sump. You know, so all the good oil pans and some of that stuff, and you know, we've done level tests and all that, but
yeah, we did a whole episode just about how oil kills power with levels, and you've got this one sorted. This flat pan, which is like a dragster or boat pan, it only wanted 5.5 quarts.
Yeah, and more caused oil pressure to drop. You know, the question is it running out? I'd add some, I took some out. You know, took kind of a last stab at it and found a level where it carries really pretty well right to 7,200 RPM.
So you just let the engine tell you how much oil it needed in there.
And you know, we're kind of in a more unique situation because the engine's static. Guys are going to run into a lot of other issues when it's in a drag car coming up, slowing down. You know, oil management's a big deal. You know, and guys, I really don't think focus enough on it because it's not just a power thing, it's a longevity thing as well. When the oil pressure is dropping, getting whipped up, it's got air in it, all kinds of bad things go on in there. So I just, you know, you can't do enough on an oil system.
Well, what we're gonna do here is try and make it flawless on a wet sump with an awesome pan, but first we need to find out what this one does. So let's hit the baseline and look at power because we can, and oil pressure.
Well, the other thing is this is as good as this pan gets. It doesn't get
any better than this. Yeah. So our first test here is going to be with our good old trusty big block Chevy with a regular old Milodon flat pan, like a dragster pan or a boat pan. It's got 5.5 quarts of oil in it. We've got it tuned up and warmed up, ready to go. I'm pretty proud of that big block.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
It's pretty nice.
Maybe that pan's not so bad after all.
Well, we have to look at the oil pressure curve. I mean, it's not that bad. I mean, I can see you using that in a lot of stuff. Like you say, it's already a better case than a sumped pan for a passenger car. All right, what do we do for power on this turd?
You know, this thing really is pretty good.
I
for
like
a little
it.
tiny one. You know, it's 478 inches.
So our final numbers here are 625.3 pound-feet of torque at 5,700 RPM, and up at 7,400 RPM, it's making 818.4. Actually, just a hair better than it did in our rod ratio test, probably because it's a little cooler now. Weather might be a little bit different.
Well, yeah, it's within 3 or 4.
It's within 3 or 4. It's virtually the same thing.
Yeah.
So let's have a look at our oil pressure
I was
curve.
just going to say, let's look at the oil pressure.
Not bad.
It's within 5.
So the range right here is roughly 87, and down here is roughly 82. So it's really not that bad. So the question is, normally what we see in this scenario is that oil pressure takes a nosedive.
Yeah, it'll come over
And so we don't have that bad of a problem here. Will the bigger pan in itself make more power, even if it doesn't have a windage problem now?
Well, can we smooth this out a little bit where it's a rising curve? I mean, we're hopefully going to see something. The thing that concerns me about where we are here is we've actually got it managed pretty well. I wouldn't want to run 5.5 quarts in a race car application.
No, I wouldn't either. So I guess now we move on to that other pan and see what happens.
Okay, Steve-O, let me know
So
when that
pan?
thing's wrapped up.
Oh
and
man,
we'll
I'll
see it
handle
for
it. I got this, bro.
Steve and I'll have a beer while we're waiting. Let's go to that flat pan that we were testing. I like it. I don't love it. The thing about it is we know that it can be pretty hideous by the fact that we only were able to run 5.5 quarts in it to get ourselves out of a windage problem. But the thing is, I really wanted to eliminate windage as much as possible from this test. If you saw episode 32 of Engine Masters, it discusses windage entirely. What is windage? It's the amount of oil that is basically whipped up around the crankshaft that is resisting crankshaft rotation and eating power, plus whipping air into the oil and causing oil pressure problems. Well, that's not what we're testing here. We pretty much have the windage controlled in that flat pan right now, although we do know that it would get way worse with a longer stroke. Why would that be? Well, because a longer stroke puts the crankshaft deeper into the pan, and it's also moving at a greater rate per RPM, so it just gives more oil in the way of the crankshaft. By using this 3.76 stroke engine, that is really less of a problem. So we're really only looking at oil pressure and capacity, overall volume inside the oil pan. And that's what we're gonna see when we move to this Moroso pan. It's a part number 20376. And let me just break this news to you. This thing at Summit Racing is $1,133.99. So it is not cheap. You gotta be hardcore to get into this. But what you get out of it is a completely fabricated aluminum pan. And it's gonna have some advantages, we hope. We'll find out. So the deal with these pans that are super trick is usually that they've got really wide kickouts on the side right here, whereas that other pan is gonna end right here along the bolt holes. As a matter of fact, it's a little narrower than that. This one has significantly more volume. Now, why would volume actually help you? People think of it as being more oil in the pan. In fact, it's doing two things. One is reducing pressure in there because higher volume of airspace is gonna have less pressure than a smaller volume. The second thing that it's doing is giving a place for the oil to escape. As the crankshaft is rotating, it's gonna kick oil into the side of the pan. Now, if it's really close to the pan, the oil doesn't have a place to go, it bounces back into the crank, you get windage. If it's got this kick out, you have a greater possibility that the oil is gonna get captured over here and return to the bottom. Here's another feature of this pan. It's got these little flaps right here, which are handy because when you're accelerating, it allows the oil to go backwards. But when you're decelerating, they close and prevent the oil from flowing away from the pickup so you don't lose oil pressure, when you're stopping. This also has a full screen type windage tray in it, similar to the pan that we just took off. What it does not have is a crank scraper, which would be even more trick for oil control. What that does is that it is like a knife edge that is exactly the shape of all of the counterweights and rods on the crank, so that as the crank is going by, it's actually scraping oil off of it and returning it to the pan. So that's next step trick. But instead, we're gonna go with this thing right now, bolted on, and man, after everything I just said, I really hope it makes more power with a flatter oil pressure curve. Speaking of installing this thing, check this out. The bottom half of this Moroso pan is completely removable. So all you're doing is installing this on the engine. Now here's the reason why this is trick. These are the pan bolt holes right here. Normally on these big kick-out pans, there's like a tube that you have to get through in order to like fish the bolt up in there. But now that you're able to remove the bottom half of it, we can hold this up against the oil pan flange and just drop our bolts in. It's gonna be super cinchy. So I'm gonna go hand this to Dulcich and hope that he installs it while I relax. We're doing the dance here that's very difficult of trying to get an oil pan installed upside down on an engine. The other thing I forgot to mention about these race pans is they often have fewer bolts than a stock pan. They put the bolts directly opposite the main caps in order to allow clearance for big stroker cranks at other points. Obviously, right at the main cap, there's no clearance problem with the crank spinning. All right, we got all the fasteners in. Now we're just gluing it, and we'll be able to tighten it up and then put the bottom half on. A two-piece pan becomes one-piece pan. New oil pan's on there. I really hope that junk works because I talked it up a lot.
How can it not? It's this big. I have a lot of confidence that pans like this with big kickouts and good screens and all of that are certainly better for power as well as oil control.
Well, it cooled down to our starting number, so you ready?
Yeah.
Oh, this is it.
We're gonna run it and find out. Wow! That was super hardcore!
Yeah, it
Wait
was.
till you see these numbers. Man! How does an oil pan make that big of a difference? I take back everything I said about windage. It's gotta be a windage problem.
No, this is really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it just kind of bears out some things that we've seen before when we had this oil pan on, and we switched to a dry sump, knowing we were going to find more, and it did
didn't
almost
make that much
nothing
difference.
because this pan was that good.
I guess.
Wow,
this is
awesome.
awesome.
Let's look at our numbers.
Well, we got power too. We got still got to look at pressure, but
Oh yeah, forget oil pressure. I don't care
who
about
needs
that.
oil pressure when you got this much
That's
power?
right. So check this out. We just made 841 horsepower at 7,400 RPM and 636.7 pound-feet of torque at 5,800. And of course, what we got to do is compare it to the old pan right now. And wow,
And it does diverge. It's just it's
Yeah.
better there and even better.
it
up
is
there.
better everywhere. That's stunning. How much more power did it make? We went from 818 to 841.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Where do you find 23 horsepower for $600? Let's say first oil pan versus second oil pan. That's a huge gain.
Yeah, that's amazing. How about the torque? What was the gain there? It went from
23 to 36, so
623 to 36. And everywhere in the curve. That actually makes the car go faster.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
significant difference.
Let's have a look at the oil pressure curve though. Oh, what happened there?
Okay.
I bet it's low.
What's the range there?
Or is it high?
Well, we're going to put oil in first.
Yeah, we're gonna put oil in.
Air to the side of caution.
What we just noticed is the oil pressure after 7,200 RPM takes a nosedive. So that's either all the oil getting sucked out of the pan or it is too much
Aerating.
oil in there, aerating and causing windage problems. So now we have to go tune that
We're
up.
on the right track there.
Look at, this is with the old pan and this is with the new pan. This is what you want to see. This you never want to see, but everything up to that point is mint.
I'm going to go put a cord in. We had started with 6.
Okay.
On Moroso's side, it says 6 to 7.5. So we
Okay.
started on the bottom side, and I figured we'd add.
You can put half in?
If it's doing this,
If
we
it's
can
doing-
fix it with a half, but we'd like to have a little reserve, so I'm going to say 1.
1, okay, put
And-
1 in it.
And if it does this again, then we'll go back the other way.
Right. All right, we're gonna throw another quart of oil in this thing and see if we can solve that pressure problem. we got to drain it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we put the 1 quart in the pan, and we noticed just without even looking at the graph that it dropped oil pressure actually earlier. So we're thinking that is a windage problem, and he's going to go take out 1.5 so that we'll have 5.5 in the pan, just like we did in the other one.
Looks close. I'll go measure this and check it again.
It's about the same.
I saw 47.
I thought the 47 just flashed right at the end.
It might have been the one when it tugged back.
When it tugged back.
It did do just that little dive again, but it was, I think, a couple hundred later.
It made 845 horsepower, so just a tick more. And yeah, it pushed the drop off way higher at the RPM. But
So now do I take
another
half?
would you really run the thing with 5 quarts in the pan?
I think I would look at the data when it's in the car. I mean, I'd be watching oil pressure.
Yeah.
The one thing I know is that when the engine's this flat, if it goes in the car at maybe 3 or 4 degrees angle,
Right.
that helps keep the oil around the pickup. So it might even be better in the car with a little bit less oil. It's hard to say.
Well, you want to take half out?
Yes, I do.
All right. Solved it.
Yeah.
Here are our final power numbers for this thing. 845.6 at 7,400 RPM and 637.7 pound-feet of torque at 5,800 RPM. Pretty stout. You want to compare it to the other pan?
Boy, this will be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love looking at that. That's too much fun.
Boom.
Yeah, it's a pretty big difference.
Pretty great. How about our new oil pressure curve? Did we solve the fall-off problem? There you go.
It's a lot different, a lot better.
We still saw a little fall off from 7,300 to 7,500, but wow, the difference in the oil pressure curve, and that is all engine longevity.
Yeah, it's, you know, keeping the air out of the oil and all the things that we've done with oil pans and always fiddling with that level. That seems to be something we do with every test these days now that we know better.
Yeah.
So.
I'd say that's all
I'm glad
win.
that worked. Yeah, exactly.
It's a lot of oil pan. It was a bit of work, but God, I mean, where else do you buy that kind of power for that kind of money? At that power level to start with.
Vacuum pump. Can we try it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I want to try and put a vacuum pump on this. You've probably never seen this. Check it out. What Steve's installing here is a vacuum pump. Remember when I was showing you this trick pan, I was talking about how the larger volume reduces pressure in the crankcase? Well, this is going to actively create vacuum in the crankcase, which can help with oil control, but mostly it's about ring seal, piston ring seal. And we've seen sometimes it doesn't make that big of a deal, other times it can be fairly huge, which is my caveat to excuse us when it doesn't actually work. But I think what we're going to try and do is make about 860 horsepower with this thing.
We've got the vacuum pump installed, got our fingers crossed, and we're hoping for some good results.
Picked up a little, not what I was
Yeah.
hoping for.
Incremental gain, I'd say.
Yeah.
You know, it surprises me a lot about this engine, how it just wants, with a single 4-barrel, how it just wants to keep going and going.
Yeah, I know. Let's have a look. Our new peaks with the vacuum pump are 849.9 at 7,400, which is the same RPM we were looking at in earlier tests. And our peak torque at 5,700 is 639.3 pound-feet. So want to overlay this versus no vacuum pump? Yeah, look at the graph overlaying vacuum pump and no vacuum pump. You can see on this particular engine, it barely made a difference, but I would run it because no leaks.
You never have to worry about a drip.
Right. Yeah, which is actually pretty good.
I'm really impressed with this engine.
Thank you.
478 cubic inches and, making
Yeah.
850 plus. That's pretty impressive.
Well, and we have to credit Andy Mitchell for assembling that engine for us, too.
Yeah, he did a great job on both. So.
Yep.
Perfect.
All right, cool.
For your
All right.
time?
Oh, yeah.
Lots.
Ready for that? We're out. This one's easy.
Really?
Oil pan. Wow.
Oh, I know that was when, seeing is believing. And I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't saw it.
And vacuum pump. Nah.
Well, still, it helps some.
I think Brule said it best, which is that the vacuum pump doesn't always work, but sometimes it's spectacular, and it really depends on the ring package in the vehicle and whether it's really having a ring flutter problem and a bunch of things like that. So it's not a
Right.
sure thing, but wow, on the oil pan, I just learned that I'm never gonna bother with a race engine again that does not have a kick-out pan, because the oil pressure alone is worth it, much less the 27 horsepower.
I know.
27.
Wow, that's like
Yeah.
an intake manifold change.
And everywhere in the curve.
And it's just taking away parasitic losses, really.
Yeah,
I mean, the
exactly.
windage is just doing you no good at all. So
Yeah.
that's big.
There you go. All win in this episode. Mind-blowing. $1,100 oil pan, kind of worth it.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I like it.
We will spend more of your money next time on Engine Masters. Oh, man. This time on Engine Masters, we are going to look at the power difference between identical heads, one iron and one aluminum. I got to put this thing down. All other things being equal, what makes more power? A cylinder head made of aluminum or one made of iron? That is the question that we're addressing on this episode of Engine Masters, and it's going to be very interesting. Obviously, aluminum heads are far lighter than iron heads, and that's a huge performance advantage. But some people believe that it's possible for an iron head to make enough more power to overcome that weight difference. Now, why would that be true? We will start with facts. Depending on the materials in the casting process and how the metal is blended, the aluminum head transfers heat roughly 5 to 6 times better than iron. Many people believe that because the iron head maybe retains more heat in the combustion chamber, that makes more pressure and that makes more power. That is the key to many of the beliefs about iron versus aluminum heads. Now, I've never done this before, but I'm gonna run through some actual comments from my Instagram account about people's beliefs between these heads so that you can think about this as we go on through this episode. Here's the thing about heat in the combustion chamber. It's very common. People believe you can run more compression with an aluminum head. This guy says, aluminum makes more power because of cooler chambers, and you must raise the compression ratio in order to prevent a power loss. Aluminum makes more power because cooler chambers draw in more oxygen. Aluminum dissipates heat, adding to better atomization of the fuel load. Remember, I'm just reading these. These are public opinions, not mine. Aluminum has more resistance to hot spots to reduce detonation. Aluminum allows more ignition timing to make more power. Iron makes more power because of valve train stability. It's more rigid than aluminum. Iron is better for low compression. Aluminum is better at high compression. Iron is better for torque. Aluminum is better for horsepower. Aluminum just plain looks cooler. That guy, I agree with. The rest of it, we're gonna be testing here on the dyno. Now, the merchandise involved is our good old Blueprint 3D3 small block Chevy. It's got just under 10-to-1 compression. It makes about 470 horsepower. The cylinder heads that we're using are both from Dart Machinery, and they assure us that they are identical, other than the material that they're made out of, and the fact that one is drilled with a tapered seat spark plug and the other one uses a gasket. Now, to verify this, Steve Brule tested them on our Superflow flow bench because he wanted to see how the air actually passes through both heads. And I will tell you that from casting to casting, you can see some variances, even if they're the same unit from the same manufacturer. And sure enough, we did see that the iron head flowed between 3 and 8 CFM more depending on what the valve lift was. So in truth, our very slight advantage in this test is going to the iron head. Everything else is the same. One is the Iron Eagle 215cc inlet runner. The other one is the Pro One aluminum head. They both have as cast runners. But does one make more power than the other? We're gonna jump through flaming hoops to find out. The first ones we're gonna test are actually these iron heads that are here on the table, and the second setup will be those aluminum heads right there. Here we go, guys, the test that I've wanted to do forever. And actually, you and I did this back when I was at Carcraft or Hot Rod roughly 20 years ago.
We did?
Well, you guys were dynoing 20 years ago? Yeah, you were like only 14.
That's about right. What's your preconceived notion about what's going to happen between iron and aluminum?
I think the aluminum head's going to make more power even though it flows a little less.
Because?
Because of the heat saturation in the cast iron, especially when we purposely heat load the cylinder head and combustion chamber.
And how about you?
I'm with him.
Exact same thing.
I'm going to go to aluminum every time.
A lot of people say the iron head should make more power because it retains heat.
And we used to run engines at 180 degrees at the drag strip too.
Yeah.
You know.
And I just really don't think they considered the time factor because the combustion cycle event happens so quickly that the heat dissipation is not going to have that much influence cycle to cycle.
Didn't you just say the opposite of that a minute ago?
No, I didn't.
You thought it was heat dissipation?
Aluminum dissipates heat faster than cast iron. But I really don't think that equates to a difference in power.
Do you believe the aluminum head makes more power?
He's confused me so much now. I don't know what I think.
That's why we're here for data instead of guessing. So first up here, we're going to do a regular straightforward dyno pull as we always do at an acceleration of 300 RPM per second and see what our baseline power is. Here's our final power numbers for our baseline on our 383. It made 464.2 pound-feet of torque at 4,700 RPM, and at 6,100 RPM, it made 469.2 horsepower. Now, the thing about this is we've completely reconfigured this engine with solid roller lifters, different cylinder heads, and a single plane intake manifold, and it makes exactly the same horsepower and way worse torque. I think the main key to all of that is really the intake manifold.
Single plane intake. Seen it too many times for it not to be, but yeah, you put all that work in and we just killed a bunch of torque.
Right. Yeah. So we've got our baseline. I'm really interested in doing stuff to put more temperature in the cylinder heads. I'm thinking a slow sweep, 100 RPM per second, to just let the thing sit there and groan and build up heat and find out if it makes any kind of difference.
Turns it into about a 30-second pull.
It's not your engine.
I know.
He doesn't care about it at all.
All right, here we go with our 100 RPM per second. Now remember, the dyno normally pulls at 300 RPM per second, which is faster acceleration rate. Now we're going to slow it way down because what I'm looking for is really putting a load on the thing and watching that temperature climb.
This is going to be good. Look at that heat soak, it doesn't even want to shut down.
Right. That's a good point.
Yeah.
That iron head could have developed a glowing spot. On that 100 RPM per second slow pull, we made 466.9 pound-feet of torque and 464.6 horsepower. Now we're going to go ahead and compare the 100 RPM per second pull to the 300 RPM per second pull.
Ooh, wow.
I see something.
I see something too.
Yeah.
Do you see what I see, Steve?
I think I do. We've had this discussion.
Yeah, I think so. What we're looking at here is the red line is 100 RPM per second, the slower pull, the greater load, the more heat. Black is actually the faster pull. Down here, we're looking at inertia. It's making more power with the slower acceleration run because it's not accelerating the mass of the engine. But then, how come it crosses over at about 52, roughly where horsepower and torque cross over, and it starts to get worse up here because it should maintain that same gap about here? It's actually because it's getting hotter.
We learned a lot of this stuff doing this show. I mean, some of this stuff that we're discussing right now, we all learned right here, which is really cool.
Now we're gonna do the steady state test. We're gonna bring it up to 4,700 RPM, which is peak torque, and just park it there until the oil temperature goes to 210 degrees. See that? It diesels when we run the thing hot every single time.
I shut it off cold and it was fine. Now I shut it off hot and it wants to run and run and run.
That's got to be a hot spot in the chamber.
You call that auto ignition.
Auto ignition. Yeah, which means firing with the spark plug not firing. Yeah.
There's something hot in there.
When we shut the thing off after doing one of these pulls, we see that it diesels or runs backwards or auto ignites. It won't shut off. And we're guessing that's because of hot spots in the iron head. So we started that test at 474.2 pound-feet of torque, and it fell off to 468. Which is reflected in the horsepower that started at 424.5 and fell down to 418. So now all we have to do is cool off these iron heads for half an hour because they retain so much heat, and then we're gonna go switch off to the aluminum. I think we should make Brule pick up the iron heads.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna have Troy pick up the iron heads while I watch.
All right, here we are. We're gonna take off these iron heads. We're gonna have to find a volunteer to heave them off. Probably gonna be Pork Chop over there. And we're converting to aluminum.
Iron is a lot heavier than aluminum, but how much? We'll find out right here on this handy scale. And iron, this is the tail of the tape, 56.5 pounds. Man, that is heavy. Ugh. Aluminum, 25.36. The weigh-in tells me that we've got a difference of 31 pounds and change.
Oh man, aluminum heads, way lighter.
You betcha. Way lighter, but are they way more powerful?
Tech tip action, I'm going to show you about pushrod guide plates. You need to use a hardened pushrod in conjunction with guide plates that are required on most aftermarket heads. The thing about the guide plates is that they are guiding the pushrod. Watch what happens when I put the rocker arms on and I've got that guide plate loose. The guide plate, when moving side to side, makes a huge difference as to where that roller rides on the tip of the valve. What you've got to do is go in and make sure that they're perfectly centered. And so the way Brule does it, he gets it centered on one valve, takes the rocker arm off, tightens that stud, and then puts it back on, and then the pushrod guide plate will be held, and he can go in there and tighten his other stud. Aluminum heads are installed. Now off camera, we fired this thing up and did a bunch of pulls to do timing sweeps. We really wanted to find out if the ignition timing advance was going to be the same or different with iron versus aluminum heads, because just moments ago I looked at my Instagram post and the guy said, you can put more timing in an aluminum head to make more power.
It may tolerate more timing, but it won't necessarily want more timing.
You mean the aluminum head will tolerate more timing if it runs cooler?
Timing is detonation limited, how much timing you can actually physically put in. Or maybe the material can have an effect on detonation, but the engine may not want that much timing.
Right,
it may make less power. Yeah.
We tipped it over where it dropped 3 or 4 horsepower straight across the board with timing, but yet it wasn't detonating.
Okay, so we've got it fired up, tuned up, and we're ready to show you the difference in power. Here are our numbers with the aluminum heads: 468.9 pound-feet of torque, 470.7 horsepower, which doesn't mean a lot until we overlay the power chart with the iron heads. Here goes.
Whoa.
Boom. Wow. Black line is the aluminum head, red line is the iron head. Look at the difference below the 5250 torque and horsepower crossover. It is huge. And then up top, it's much less of a difference. It's down to 1 or 2, but honestly, the advantage is still to the aluminum head.
Yeah, it's amazing down here. There's 20 pound-feet difference.
But the question is why? Why would aluminum head make more power below peak torque? We're looking at the graph of the airflow through our carburetor hat, and sure enough, you can see that the aluminum head is moving more air down at the bottom end. Not as much as you might guess based on the difference in the two curves.
Quite a bit of torque difference for what we're seeing here of, 8 CFM difference.
8 CFM is pretty significant down that low.
Well, and we know that up top, oddly enough, the iron head is actually flowing more than the aluminum head, but they make exactly the same power.
The iron heads do have a flow advantage on when you test them on the flow bench. They're just slightly better, whether that's production variation. I mean, they're very close to the exact same configuration, but they did test at a higher flow, slightly.
I think we need to go to the 100 RPM test and see if we can see any differences there. The heat soaker.
Oh yeah.
The engine killer. When we pull the thing much more slowly, we end up with 473.3 pound-feet of torque and 468.6 horsepower. So the real story is when we overlay the iron head in the same kind of test. Boom. Wow. Black line is aluminum, red line is iron. So aluminum wins once again with a weird little warble going up here at the top.
But overall, very similar to what we were seeing at 300 RPM per second, because the low end torque advantage is still there, and then it narrows towards the top.
Does that tend to disagree with the theory that the aluminum dissipates more heat out of the chamber because at 100 RPM step, we're giving it more time? It's not really showing a difference in performance, though. These are the two different acceleration rates compared. At the 100 RPM rate, it actually is moving a little bit more air.
Which is where it made more power.
We found when we did another episode with the intake manifolds, the heat didn't really transfer into a fast-moving column of airstream.
It's just like if you have a spoonful of soup and you go, it doesn't cool off. But if you go, it cools off. It's the same exact thing.
I do that whenever I have hot soup.
Do you? How about coffee? You do the coffee too?
Oh, yeah.
What we keep talking about with this temperature versus airflow thing is that we discovered in a prior test when we were looking at coolant temperatures, hot versus cold, that the colder the chamber, the more airflow you can get into it, because when the chamber is hotter, it's a higher pressure area, so the differential between atmospheric and the chamber is much higher. And so colder allows more airflow, and that's what we've been looking at here. So far, aluminum heads is still on top. Now we have to do the bring it up to peak torque and gather data till it hits 210 degrees of oil temperatures. All right, here we go with our 4,700 RPM steady state test. Okay, so we started at a higher torque number. With the aluminum heads, we started this test at 480.8 pound-feet of torque, and with the iron head, it was 475. But then it falls off actually at a greater rate. The aluminum head fell down to 468, which is exactly the same as what the iron head did. And it looked to me just, anecdotally, not data-wise, that it dove faster in truth.
But I don't know what to attribute that to.
I wonder if it starts with a cooler combustion chamber just through the idling process and all that. Even though the water temperature is the same, the combustion chamber itself is not as hot.
Right.
It's not retaining the heat like the iron head does all the way through the material.
Because there's more time for it to pass out. and the iron retains it, but the aluminum, they ultimately both reach the same temperature. So we went from 142 degrees to 159, just a speck hotter than we did with Iron Head, which was 138 to 156. But you're right, heat transfer goes both ways. So it gets up to the same temperature faster.
Quicker.
Yeah, which is something that people don't consider. So when they say you can run or should run more compression with an aluminum head, I can see how driving around on the street at low throttle position, idling, stoplight to stoplight, that's true. At wide open throttle, from what we're seeing here, I would say it's not true.
Ultimately, they're going to converge in temperature over time and load. At a high heat load, it'll reach an equilibrium.
This is not what I expected to learn on this one.
No, but it's kind of bearing out what we thought we knew once anyway. I mean, what we learned on other episodes and stuff, which is kind of good. I mean, it just verifies the same test and the same information, the same data again.
It's great when physics repeat itself.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't
when they
it?
don't, we've done something wrong.
Yeah.
I think the conclusion is obvious. Aluminum heads. It's
Yeah.
really all there is. You're done here.
Thanks.
Thank you for your service, Steve Brule.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Look how happy Brule is.
Oh, I am happy.
Yeah.
Well, iron versus aluminum heads.
I came into this test with some preconceived notion, and I'm sure generally people do.
Oh, I have to admit that I had the same thing. But what we're gonna do now is compare our preconceived notions with everybody else's. For the first time ever, I'm gonna take the comments that I got directly from my Instagram page that I read off at the top of the show, and we're gonna challenge each one of them as we, compare it to what we learned here.
Okay, hit me.
Much of this is based on people's belief that iron heads run hotter and aluminum heads run cooler, which we will give you as a granted in some circumstances. But when you say things like, when switching to aluminum heads, you must raise the compression ratio to prevent a power loss. True or false?
False.
False! Yeah, we absolutely did not see that. Aluminum makes more power because cooler chambers draw in more oxygen molecules.
I would say that's true up to a point, maybe where there's a time factor at lower RPM. And we saw that because we did pick up a little bit of power at the bottom of the curve.
Brule and I did this exact same thing in 2005. And in that test, the curves absolutely overlaid. There was no difference whatsoever. Aluminum has more resistance to hot spots to reduce detonation.
I would say that's probably true. I'm a believer.
And here's the very last one, and the single most popular thing that we hear people say is that iron heads make more power because they retain more heat and put more pressure in the combustion cycle and therefore make more horsepower.
And I've never bought into that.
I don't think there's a circumstance where more heat makes more power, honestly.
Not really.
So power-wise, I feel pretty good with that conclusion. I mean, on many tests, I say caveats like, well, in this application, things may change, things are different. You can't always say it. In this case, I will say iron heads do not ever make more power than aluminum heads. Why are the other reasons why iron is terrible?
The elephant in the room there is obviously the weight.
They're ridiculously heavier. Okay, that's our final wrap up on iron versus aluminum heads. I think everybody is unanimous. Just buy aluminum if you can possibly afford it. More power next time on Engine Masters. You've heard of degreeing a camshaft, but what does it mean and how does it affect power? Well, that's what you're gonna find out on this episode of Engine Masters, plus Dulcich's personal quest to make 400 horsepower from our 440. It's low buck, it's low compression, it's straight out of a motorhome. Can he do it? Stay tuned to find out.
My 440 is back. Now this is a stock motorhome 440 and we tested it on Engine Masters. It didn't really make the power I was hoping for, but I think I might be able to improve on it by messing with the cam timing. Now what's that? Well, it has a big effect on power and I'll start with the basics. Here's the exhaust lobe, and imagine this is the intake lobe. I'm gonna first talk about something different than cam timing, and that's the lobe separation angle. When the cam is made, there's a certain angle between the intake and exhaust lobes. And basically, if I wiggle my hands like that, this would be a narrow lobe separation, and this would be wide. But once the cam is ground, that spec is set. However, how the cam's installed in the engine is called the installed centerline angle. A lot of people will confuse those two terms, but the installed centerline angle is where the cam is parked in relation to the crankshaft. Now, why is that important? Because the crankshaft controls the piston position, and where the cam is in relationship to the crank is going to control how the valves are opening and closing in relation to the piston. Our test engine here, you might have seen on a previous episode of Engine Masters, it's a stone stock motorhome 440. As a matter of fact, the bottom end and the cylinder heads have not been touched. The factory pistons here are 156 in the hole. What it means is this pooch has 7.2 to 1 compression, and that's bad. Now, we did do a little modification program on this engine. In that particular episode, we put on an Edelbrock Performer RPM intake manifold. We ran this same Brawler carburetor, and we installed a Comp Thumper cam. It's a pretty hot street grind. It's got 227, 241 degrees duration at 50, and that's not bad. Now, the camshaft was installed at 101 degree installed center line, and it's ground on 107 degree lobe separation. That's a heck of a lot of advance, 6 degrees, and the engine turned out to be kind of a pooch. It made 381 horsepower at a paltry 4,900 RPM. And honestly, I just wasn't all that happy with it. I'm hoping that by dialing in the cam's installed center line, I might be able to improve on that. I'd like to see this thing make 400 horsepower. I'm not sure it's gonna get there no matter where we put the cam, but we're gonna roll it into the dyno and find out.
Brule, I don't know if you've heard, but Dulcich has a new nickname.
Really?
The dog catcher.
What do you mean?
The 440 is a pooch.
Oh, seriously.
I took the collar off this morning so we could run it.
Brule! Come on, man. Have a little respect. That's 440 cubic inches of Mopar power right
At 381 horsepower. You know, to be fair, this thing only makes 381 horsepower, but I'm the guy saying this cheap 440 motorhome engine package is actually pretty good for a drive-around muscle car. What does it make for torque? 470 something?
470, yeah.
Yes, and at low RPM. Even though it's not up to your standards as far as horsepower per cubic inch, I still think it's a good engine for the typical guy. All right, well, what we're gonna do now is run the baseline on this thing and see exactly why we are criticizing this engine, which I say is not that bad, and Dulcich can't stand it. So here we go. And this, by the way, is with a 107 lobe separation angle, and it's in at 101, so it's 6 degrees advanced.
Lobe center line?
Yeah.
And here's the thing about that. I mean, I thought that would be good because it's low compression and that would favor mid-range and low-end torque.
Closing the intake valve earlier to capture more compression.
Yes, but I think maybe that might have been too much. And that's really why
What
I
we're here to
wanted to
find
do
out,
this
yeah.
test.
Yep.
See what would happen with the different setting on that
It's already a
camshaft.
small cam. Then you go way forward with it. It's just not going to have any
It's
engine
turtly.
speed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see.
Here we go.
Oh man, it's coming in.
Might have picked up 1 or 2 horsepower.
Oh no, I thought I saw an 85 there, but we'll see
Yeah.
what the numbers tell us.
Oh, that is not bad.
467.2 pound-feet of torque and 384 horsepower. Well, that 4,900 RPM power peak, I think, is an indicator that it's too far advanced.
Yeah.
And it also could be the heads are very
Turtly,
small
and it has no compression,
and they're stock.
and they're stock. So when a camshaft is advanced, it tends to favor low-end performance, and when it's retarded, it tends to favor higher-end performance. So at this point, I guess we have to show everybody both sides of what happens with advance and retard, so we're actually gonna go out there on the cam that's way too far advanced
And advance it more.
and advance it more. We're gonna put another 4 degrees in-ish, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's gonna be good.
Yeah,
gonna be weird.
good. It's gonna be weird.
It's gonna be so bad it'll be good.
Hey, we should make one point though, which is if you're doing this on your own engine, you really need to check valve to piston clearance.
Right.
Because moving the camshaft around can affect that a lot. But on this particular motorhome 440, where the pistons are how far in the hole?
154 thousandths.
There is no chance that a valve's ever gonna hit a piston. So this is the perfect engine for this test. Ready?
All right, let's go to work.
Let's do it. Now these guys have exposed the timing, chain, and gear set, which can give you a better visual representation of what we're gonna do as far as advancing and retarding the camshaft. Remember that when we give numbers as far as advance or retard, like when we say it's installed at 101, that is the position of the center line of the intake lobe in relation to the degrees of rotation of the crankshaft. You usually don't worry about that. You line up the dots here on the timing set, but this particular timing set has 9 different keyways in it so that you can move the cam around. Here's how that's gonna work. Imagine the crankshaft staying in position right where it is, but we're going to rotate the camshaft either forward or backwards. Obviously, because the engine rotates clockwise from the front, if we roll this clockwise, it's going to advance the cam. If we roll it this way, it's going to retard the cam. When you advance it, you make all of the valve events happen sooner. When you retard it, they all happen later as it relates to the piston position.
Changing the cam timing will also sometimes change the pressure in the cylinder, and the main reason is it changes when the intake valve closes. Having a lot of advance like we have now will close the intake valve earlier, and remember, you don't capture any compression until the intake valve closes. So, Steve-O, are you ready with the gauge?
Yep.
I'm gonna open the throttle so we don't have any restriction to air entering, and the answer is, ooh, not bad, 150?
More than I thought it would be. I was just guessing around 120 or 30, but no, 150 is not
Well, that
that bad.
explains
Makes
it.
a lot of torque though.
Yeah.
It's down low.
150 is not race engine territory by any means, but it's pretty good for a very, very low compression engine like this.
All right,
put
now
it
we
back
got work
together.
to do.
There you go. We advanced the camshaft 4 degrees, or at least we think so, because we didn't put a degree wheel on it, right? But the little mark on the doohickey
We
said
moved it 4 degrees further advanced than it was.
Right. We know it's advanced more.
And it was degree wheeled at 101, so that's dead nuts. So unless there's a little manufacturing error, we're talking about 97 degrees installed center line now.
Which means 10 degrees of advance off straight up, which is a lot.
That's about 1 degree away from missing it a tooth.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But I think it was advanced too much to begin with, so I'm not expecting this to improve the
this'll be
situation a
worse.
lot. But
Yeah.
it may make more torque. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what it does.
It should tip that
Why we're
curve,
here.
right?
Yeah.
This way.
It's what it's supposed to do.
All right, let's find out.
What if it's going to make it a beast of a 440?
I hope
might.
so. I hope you're happy. I'm only here to make you happy.
I know, I
Message.
want to be happy with my 440.
Okay, what we're gonna do now is our first pull with the camshaft advanced even more, 10 degrees total.
Wow, it sounds lazy. Man, that is such a lazy engine.
Well, here's our new power numbers: 466 pound-feet of torque, 376 horsepower, which is not radically different, but let's see what it did compared to the other timing setting. This is one of those engines that just doesn't care because it's a pooch. It's kind of a 3-legged pooch, actually.
Actually, it did exactly what it was supposed to do, Freiberger.
It
Give
did.
it credit.
It tilted the curves,
Look at
that's for
that.
sure.
Actually, I don't know if it did what it was supposed to do. I think we made it do what it was supposed to do.
Oh, that's a matter of semantics.
What's your plan, Dulcich?
I don't like what it did there. I think if we back the cam up, it's going to be better. So I'm going to dash out to the dyno room and make that
retard it.
change. You guys are helping, right?
And the tension builds. We just retarded the camshaft to 107 degree installed center line. And we are once again gonna do a cranking compression test to find out if it changed at all.
One, 3, 2.
132.
32.
So there you go. Theory proven out once again. Now let's go dyno test it and see what power it made. Okay, here we go with our third test. Now remember, in our very first test, we had the camshaft installed at an intake lobe center line of 101 degrees.
Right.
Then the next thing that we did is advanced it to 97 degrees, and now we retarded it to 107 degrees, which is what we would call straight up. Yeah, the same number as the lobe separation angle, which is sort of an insignificant, sort of lingo. But regardless, we started at one point, and then in test number 2, we advanced it, and in test number 3, we retarded it. And so theoretically, that means it should make a little bit more top-end power now. And the number I called was 392. How about you?
I want more than 400 horsepower. That
Not
would
happening.
be pretty good.
No.
No.
No, I've seen this.
The 392
I've met this
would be
engine.
so close.
I was off by 1.
Yeah, what's the matter with you, Freiberger?
I know.
You're just chiseling me when I think I saw 393.
Yeah.
It might have actually even made more low end than when it was in at 97.
Really? Let's have a look.
Or
It might
the
just be
same.
happier overall.
It's kinda cute. Okay, so that's
That's a lot of torque.
Our new numbers are 464.8 pound-feet of torque, and our best ever, 392.4 horsepower. You gonna chisel me on the 0.4?
No, you got it. You
Should
were
I
right.
have guessed the 0.4?
No, we're using standard rounding here, so Freiberger, you win.
What are we gonna compare it with? Let's compare it with when we had it all the way advanced. There you go. So what you're looking at here is in black, you have it when we had it retarded, and in red, you've got it when it was advanced. So when it's advanced, it makes more low-end power. When it's retarded, it makes more top-end power. So this is textbook.
if that's the case, then the one that it started with should be in the middle.
Right in the middle.
Boom.
And step 1 is right in the middle.
Wow.
Yep.
Very curious results. It did what it was supposed to do.
Yeah, did exactly
Just-
what it was supposed to do. I think it was a good example. I think the swing wasn't quite as much as we see sometimes, but it's not radically different than that.
No, it's kind of what I would expect, I think. It's 10 degrees is a lot of change in cam
It's a
time.
big swing, but that's
Normally we're
because
wiggling them 2 here, 2 there, each side to kind of look at it.
the engine's insensitive. It doesn't care.
Yeah, it has no compression ratio, but what it does tell me is it probably wants more camshaft.
You think?
That's what it's telling me.
Everything wants more
Yeah,
cam
even
shaft.
with the low compression, it wants more cam.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a stock eliminator engine. You put a ton of duration in it to crutch the garbage cylinder head.
Yeah.
I think I can still make this run 12s in a car, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You've done it before.
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I knew that I could probably make it run 12 in a car.
Never makes a bet unless he knows the answer.
That's it. Okay, I'll make you a deal, Dulcich.
Ooh, I'm all ears. I'm perked up.
Gonna pull this dog off the dyno and never see it again until you install high compression slugs in it.
Oh, I intend to. I've already bought them, and they
Done.
will go in. But actually, it's not bad the way it is.
It's
not
actually,
bad.
it's way better than we were making it out to be. It's just been a lot of fun. I mean, it makes huge torque. It's a tire fryer. It's inexpensive. It's all the good stuff. So,
Yeah, that's it.
You can be in high school and do a motorhome 440 just like that, and have a ton of torque, be able to do burnouts for distance, everything you want in a muscle car.
You can buy that intake manifold at a swap meet for about $150. You can get a Holley 750 double pumper for $150, $200 in good shape at the swap meet, and then you buy a new camshaft, which is a flat tappet, so it's not that expensive. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, let's go wrap this thing up.
Okay.
Here's the 15-second summary of this episode. Just a textbook demonstration of what happens with camshaft timing. We advanced the cam and it tips the curve in favor of the bottom end. We retarded the cam and it tipped the curve in favor of the top end and nearly made Dulcich's 400 horsepower.
Missed it by that much.
7.5. But that's not what I want to talk about in the conclusion, because I learned something completely different that got my brain going, and that was when we started doing cranking compression.
Oh, yeah.
So you'll notice that we had 152 PSI of cranking compression when we had the cam all the way advanced, and then we retarded it and it dropped all the way down to 130, 132,
It
somewhere
dropped
in
a
that.
bunch.
Yeah, so that doesn't make sense, right? We reduced the cranking pressure and we made more horsepower. But I think that's actually really interesting as it relates to engine speed and where the intake valve closes.
Well, think about it. When you're spinning the engine along at 200 RPM on the starter, the air is moving super slow. When you're at high RPM, though, you're ramming the air past that intake valve as it's coming around as the piston's coming around bottom dead center. And that's a whole different dynamic for sure.
Yeah, completely. I think everybody doesn't realize that the intake valve closes as the piston is on its way up on the compression stroke. And a lot of people talk about dynamic compression ratio, and they focus on trying to make that number as big as it can. But what we saw here is that when we close the intake valve later, there was more air coming into the cylinder, which led to greater cylinder pressure, which made more horsepower. Do you agree?
Well, absolutely. It had more horsepower at higher RPM, which means it made more torque at all those RPM points, which torque is the product of cylinder pressure. So there's no debating that as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and when we had the cam really far advanced, that means closing the intake valve sooner. And I think basically the air was still trying to make its way in, and we slammed the door shut and said, no thanks.
Yeah, and you can also see that in the RPM at which it made peak power. It came up by a couple hundred RPM, which I was happy about because I got the 5 handle.
Yeah.
I almost couldn't live with myself peaking at 4,900.
Yeah. So anyway, that was the biggest takeaway I had, is realizing how many elements of engine performance are time-based, and just high RPM needs more time. That air is still moving in. You got to close that intake valve at just the right time. You don't know exactly when that is, but you can find out by experimenting with cam timing as we've shown you.
And find free horsepower.
Exactly. Good stuff, as it will be next time on Engine Masters. This time on Engine Masters, we're going to show you how to verify your camshaft and probably pick up a little power for free. As in no simoleons, no dollars, no euros, no pesos, zero zilch nada, free. Here we go. First, I'm going to tell you about what we're going to do in this test, and then I will fill you in on this excellent engine package. So what we're going to do is called lash loops. This applies to anything with a solid cam, whether it's a roller or a flat tappet. And in fact, it applies to overhead cams or anything that has a solid cam with lash. So let's talk about what is lash. It is the distance between the end of the rocker arm and the top of the valve. So just to inform some of you who may not be completely up to speed on all this, what we're looking at is a push rod here that's acting on a roller lifter and a camshaft. So this push rod goes up and down. The rocker arm, guess what? It rocks back and forth like this to open the valve. And of course the valve spring then closes the valve. So that's how this all operates. But then that lash there is required because with a solid, or let's call it mechanical camshaft, you need a little bit of play there, because otherwise as the engine heats up and cools down, it'll end up breaking parts or hanging a valve open or something like that. The good news is we can use lash for tuning. That's because if there is less lash, it tends to add just a hair of camshaft duration. If there's more lash, it actually takes away a little bit of camshaft duration. The relationship of valve lift is directly proportional to lash. If you tighten up your lash by 10/1000ths of an inch, you just picked up 10/1000ths of an inch of valve lift as well. So what we're gonna do in this test is go through and first take the intake valve and adjust the lash smaller and then larger. And then we're gonna do the same thing on the exhaust side, smaller and then larger. And we're gonna look at our power curves and figure out which one is better. Now this can give you a clue as to your camshaft performance. If you really like looser lash, it tells you you might have picked a camshaft with too much duration, because the looser lash is gonna reduce that duration. And this will be very clear to you as we go through the dyno steps. So let's tell you about the engine combination here. And if you followed Engine Masters at all, you know this pooch, because it's pretty awesome and we've used it a bunch. It's a weirdo though. It's a big block Chevy. It's 478 cubic inches. Now that's really strange, but regardless of that, it runs really well. It's got JE custom pistons for 12.25-to-1 compression. It's got Dart Pro 1 heads on it with 365cc inlet runners. It's topped by a Dart manifold and a Holley 1050 carb. But let's get into the meat of what you really care about on this engine. It has a craned solid roller camshaft, and it is a no fooling cam. The duration at 50,000s tappet lift is 284 on the intake, 296 on the exhaust, and it's on a 112-degree lobe separation angle. It's gonna make about 850 horsepower, and it's gonna scream to 7,500 RPM. It's a great platform to find out if we're gonna be able to adjust our lash and learn if maybe we picked the right camshaft or maybe we didn't. So we're gonna slap the valve cover on and hang this thing on the dyno and find out facts. All right, I think we know what this engine does. We've run it a jillion times at this point.
A few laps.
It does a lot.
Has a lot of laps on it, but I don't know, different weather, different day. Right now you've got the lash at 21 to 22 thousandths,
Both intake and exhaust.
and that's the hot number.
Hot relative to what we test at. We're testing at about 130, 35 degrees.
Okay, yeah. Different than room temperature cold.
Yes.
So how much does it grow on an engine like this?
From like a 75 or 80 degree day, it's probably going to grow 4 thousandths. If we were to lash them at 150 or 60 degrees, I'm seeing about 3 thousandths difference from 19 to 21, 22.
Okay. So you would cold lash this at like 18, and then it'll stretch to
19,
21, 22,
Yeah.
that neighborhood. Okay, cool. Let's show them again what this engine makes for power. Performed as expected.
That was a good number.
Yeah. So there's our baseline, pretty much as expected. 633.6 pound-feet of torque at 5,700 RPM and 854.1 horsepower up at 7,500. Now, it needs to be noted that we're only running this engine to 7,500. Honestly, we think that it makes peak power at 76, 77.
Yeah.
But we're really worried about the valve control with no shaft rockers, no stud girdle, and stainless steel valves that are probably 2,350, like big old valves, too.
Or, yeah, what?
So
I was thinking 2,300, 2,350. They're probably 2,350.
that's our baseline. What's our first step in testing lash?
I don't know. Maybe just leave it alone because it's so good the way it is. I'm afraid that anything we do is going to make less power. I'm thinking the kind of procedure we'll work on is we will go tighter intake and looser intake. Decide which of those two is better, and then leave that there where it's at, and then go to the exhaust and kind of do the same thing and just look for both, whichever combination of those are the best.
So you're gonna go put it tighter intake right now. What number?
I'm not the kind of guy that's going to go out there and do 2,000s. That's not going to show us any trends. I'm going to take a swing at it, go like 8 or 10.
Okay. So
Makes sense.
that leaves us with 10.
My only concern is going the other side to do, if we're going to do,
That loose.
getting
Gets
it
kinda
over
rackety.
30,
Yeah.
34 thousandths. I think that maybe we do 10 and 10 each way.
So we're gonna go out there, and I say we, I mean Lightning Lash Brule, who's gonna handle this in like a flash. But we're gonna set the intake valves at 12 thousandths of an inch, closing them up about 10, which means we're gonna be adding a little bit of lift microscopically and a little bit of duration to the intake side.
About every 6 thousandths is going to be about 1 degree in duration.
So we're not making huge changes here, but we're seeing trends, hopefully. Dulcich disagrees.
What do you mean?
Well, you were telling me off camera that you didn't believe that the lash was going to make a bit of difference because it's in the ramp of the lobe.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see the results because every time I've tried it, it seems like looser was better than tighter.
I mean, like I say, it's unique to every engine. So
Right. Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't matter, but I've seen as much as 30 getting
But
the
it-
lash correct.
Like I said, I really want to see what this is going to do on this
So
engine.
it's your job and mine to go pull valve covers.
Okay, let's go.
The procedure I use is adjust the intake valve when the exhaust valve is opening and adjust the exhaust when the
intake is about half closed. Really, that's nothing more than a visual reference from outside the engine, since I can't see the camshaft, to tell me that the valve I'm adjusting is absolutely on the heel of the camshaft. It's the way I was taught. It works on every 4-stroke engine. You can follow the firing order sequence if you choose, or you can just run down the row. But as long as you keep your eye on that cylinder, then it's the same on every 4-stroke.
Done in record time. I think that was about 8 minutes, start to finish, which is good because we have to do it like 5 more times. Now we've got the lash 10,000ths of an inch tighter, theoretically adding just a hair lift and a hair of duration.
Only on the intake, right?
Only on the intake, right.
Okay. Well,
Steve Brule, it's all yours. Okay, to really know what happened there, we're gonna have to overlay the 2 curves and inspect very, very closely because it's not much. This is all the same. So I'm gonna say that did nothing that we care about. Do you agree with that?
I agree.
Yeah, nothing we care about.
Definitely didn't help it, I can tell you that.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna go back out there now and loosen the intake rather than tightening it. We're gonna go 10,000ths looser, which brings us to a lash hot of 32,000ths. All right, here we go.
This looks like we may be doing just some fine points. I mean, valve lash adjustments. Generally, the camshaft manufacturer will give you a spec, you set it to that spec, and you forget about it. But how do you know if that spec is going to give you the most power? And really, that's what we're after here. On the dyno, we have the opportunity to test what is best. Does it want to be looser? Does it want to be tighter? The lash loop will tell us what the engine really wants.
Now we've gone to loose lash on the intake only. We got 32,000ths, and so that means we're going to cut a tiny, tiny bit of lift and a tiny bit of duration.
Dulcich had an idea of why he thought this might be better.
Well, I mean, the early part of the ramp is called the lash ramp, where it goes up really mildly as far as the cam profile to take up the lash and not do it too violently. As you open up the lash, you're getting higher up on that lash ramp and you're getting closer to the actual opening ramp or the flank of the cam, so you're gonna have a quicker valve action off the seat.
Just
setting.
like looking at duration at 50,000ths tap at lift versus 200. I mean, obviously it's not that extreme with the lash, but you're saying it's hitting later on the lobe, and so the lobe is more aggressive at that point.
Yeah. But it's going to be harder on parts, too.
Yeah,
right?
right.
Theoretically, it should still be soft enough where it'll be fine at this setting. You're 32?
Yeah, 32.
Okay, let's find out. Surprising. Wow.
Yeah.
Wait till you see these numbers. Pretty impressive. So what we saw as the power was going by is that it made a lot more power with the loose lash on the intake. So less duration ended up making more horsepower, 860.5 horsepower, the best we've ever seen out of this engine.
Oh.
And look at that, it absolutely helped it everywhere, and peak torque of 647.9. Best it's ever done, but the real story is look what it did everywhere in the curve. And not surprisingly, it's better down low than it is up top because we reduced duration. Wow.
But it really came in on the roll in.
Well, I mean, I think it's pointing us in a direction in the RPM range we're running, and I think it might be saying we picked a little big.
So this was 284 at 50. It's telling us we want like 278? Or do you think it's telling us we want 283?
You know, the best cam guys I know will look you straight in the face and go, this should do this.
Right?
There's no one answer. I mean, we'd have to
Right.
run 3 of them through there and look for the best. That's why we test.
Right now, I'm saying this cam's the right cam with 32 degrees. 32,
But it might be the way that it's
valve.
opening the valve now.
yeah.
But can we drive it around, race it at 32,000ths lash, or is
Oh,
it going to beat itself up? It's going to beat the tip of the valve. It's going to beat the axle and the roller.
I think it's okay.
I think you'd have to look at the specific lobe
and find out what's happening at that point when it opens to see how bad it's slapping it around.
Steve, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but old school mechanical cams, like back in the day, it was not unusual to be 30, 32 thousandths as recommended.
And a lot of that, they were flat tappets.
Flat tappets, yeah.
And they...
Back in your day.
Oh, I will. Wait till we're
You
done.
can reach me from here.
Get off my lawn.
Right.
Yeah, you know, the old Duntop 3030s, a lot of that stuff. But I will tell you today, I still see a number of camshafts come in here that have lash settings hot in the 28 and 32 range.
That's why I'm not afraid of it beating stuff up, because it is not a really uncommon setting.
I think we can all agree, wow.
Yeah.
And so the next thing that we're gonna go do is tighten up the exhaust lash.
This is a really, really
This is all-
educational test.
It's way better than I
because
expected.
Look at how much torque is gained right there at the bottom of the curve.
It's huge.
Nobody would expect that from, you know, a lash setting. This is the right test engine for this. It's got a really wide RPM range. It's high RPM. It's got a big cam, so it may be more sensitive to a lash adjustment than.
But whether it's a percentage or a number, it all matters. Everything that we're doing to this thing. Look, we started out, you know, a while back working on this thing, and it was what, an 800 horsepower engine,
motor.
and we haven't done a lot of trickery here, and we're at 860. We haven't changed a camshaft.
Right.
We haven't done rock arms. We haven't done any real hard parts. We've done kind of like oil pans and vacuum pumps and the stuff that a guy's going to do, picking
you
away at
whittle
stuff.
away at it, yeah.
How much does 60 horsepower cost if you just go try and buy that?
Yeah.
I think we bargained hunted here, you know, as far as finding that kind of power.
So next up, we're gonna go out there and tighten the lash on the exhaust side. And obviously, we're leaving the intake right where it is.
We are.
All right, ready? Another 8 minutes, more power. Here we go again, this time tight lash on the exhaust. And of course, we left the intake where it was. Go. So on that pull, we made 861 horsepower and we lost a little bit of torque, 643.7. So net, it did nothing. Let's see if it actually lost a little. Yeah, it lost a little bit in the mid-range. Yeah. Tight lash exhaust sucked. We're gonna move on to loosening it up. Ready?
Okay, we're well practiced this now.
Yes, we are. Okay, I can't be disappointed at this point, but what's your call? Loose lash on the exhaust, better or worse?
At least better down low.
It's going to be better everywhere.
Okay, I hope so. We're gonna see 865 horsepower-wise?
I think we'll break 860 is my prediction.
We already have.
Have we?
860.5, and we ran 861 just after that.
Okay, we'll have to wait and see the number, right?
Yep.
That's a tough number to beat. but we're
Yeah.
gonna try.
All right, Brule, do that thing you do. Okay, will it be better? Will it be worse? We always have the knee jerk of wanting to talk about it, but you gotta look at the actual data. That says 855 horsepower, down 5, 649.7 pound-feet of torque, up microscopically. How about lay it over and see what we did? So what we're looking at here is the red line is what we deemed earlier today to be our best pass yet. It was the one where we had loose lash only on the intake side. The black line is the last test that we made where it's still loose on the intake, but also loose on the exhaust. And it's interesting because it actually ended up making more low end loosening up the exhaust and not as much up at the top.
This doesn't surprise me. I mean, shortening up the exhaust some, you need the additional exhaust for engine speed, and we're revving this thing up there pretty good.
Yeah.
If this were a 7,000 RPM combination, that probably wouldn't be there and wouldn't matter. We would never see it. But it picked up the bottom, which is kind of...
Yeah.
But then if you were drag racing this engine, you've got at least a 5500 converter, and that really doesn't matter. So I think bottom line is it doesn't care about the exhaust lash. I mean, it does tell us that the engine at very low speeds prefers less duration on the exhaust side, but not over the top.
Yeah, you know, it leads me to want to try a camshaft that's very dissimilar to what it is, work on the intake side some, but widen the lobe separation a little bit. Try and help pick up this engine speed some more once that rocker arm thing you do is going to happen, and we get some shaft rockers on it, some other stuff, we can rev it up to 8,000.
Because this thing's on a 112, you're saying you would like put the cam at a 114 lobe separation angle?
Let it run
and
up
let it
there.
eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is good, because I was going to ask you guys what you would conclude from this.
I don't know.
Where do you go from here? Do you change the
Well, I
camshaft?
don't know. I mean, it depends on where you're at. I mean, if this was mine and I had have that cam, I mean, going out and buying another cam, whereas I'm getting pretty good performance out of it as it is, I'd probably just optimize the lash and call it a day.
So that's the practical side, which is
Yeah.
a great argument. Let's say that you're not spending money and you wanted to put a different cam in it. Would you, or
Oh,
would
I
you
know
call
exactly.
this cam, good?
I know exactly what I would do.
What?
I would ask Brule.
Okay,
And then I
Brule.
would just widen the set a little bit, maybe
Yeah.
add a couple of degrees of exhaust duration, shorten up the intake, and see what it does.
Exactly, because it's going to like that longer exhaust for engine speed as well as the nitrous. So that's a win-win if you're headed that
nitrous.
direction. Oh, you hadn't planned on that yet?
Duh.
Well, no, that's done. So
Right.
I think what Steve's onto has a lot of merit to it. Just
The valve
opening
opening
quicker.
rate.
By today's standards, we are not pushing lift at all. We're below 800.
I know.
Guys don't do stuff below 900 anymore.
What's wrong with us? Yeah, that was really interesting.
good.
That was
Good
cool.
stuff.
Yep,
Yeah.
and more power than we've ever had
Ever.
from that motor. Dude, this thing just made its personal best record power for 0 simoleons.
I know, and that's always an accomplishment. And you know what? It speaks to something that's very important to me, and that's like fine-tuning and adjustment. Why does one guy's motor with the same parts run way harder than somebody else's?
Yeah, we found a lot of power on this thing. I mean, 25 pound-feet way down low.
Yeah.
And 8 up top and better everywhere in the curve for literally not $1, which is really cool. But we learned something about how our camshaft duration, could be improved with the different lash and everything. Would you ever bother to change that with rocker arm ratio instead of with lash? Like, this thing has a 1.7 rocker on it. If it liked more duration, would you put a 1.8 rocker on it?
I would consider it if I was going to replace the whole valve train anyway. In the case of this engine, maybe we want 8,000 RPM instead of 7,500. Maybe
Well,
we
we
want
do.
shaft rockers instead of stud mounted. And at that point, well, the 1.8 will be awfully tempting.
I feel there's one last really important point that I need to make for the audience, though. What we just showed you is a procedure that you can use on your engine, and you can do it not just on a dyno, but also at the drag strip.
Oh, yeah.
The key is you don't want to just take the lash numbers that we just learned on this engine and apply them to your engine. It really is specific combination to combination.
Oh, yeah, your results will vary. That's the right lash for this combination, but your engine might want something completely different.
The stuff that we show on Engine Masters can be applied to any engine. As I mentioned earlier, you can do this with an overhead cam 4-cylinder and it still works.
Or a Jeep engine.
See? Engine Masters, improving your life every time.